Assalamu alaikum dear students, I am Farooq Abdullah with series of lectures on history of English literature. Dear students, in our previous lecture we dealt with Restoration Age in English literature, and today we are going to talk about classical age in English literature. Age span of classical period in English literature is from 1700 to 1798. Roughly 18th century in English literature is called classical age in English literature. Now this classical age in English literature is further divided into two distinct periods. First period is from 1700 to 1745, and in this period Alexander Pope was the most dominant and prominent literary figure. That's why this period is also called the age of Alexander Pope. And the later period of classical age is from 1745 to 1798, and during this time Dr. Johnson was the most prominent and dominant literary figure. So that's why this age is called as the age of Dr. Johnson, or it is called as age of Johnson. And let me tell you that the cracks had started appearing in the mighty and great structure of classicism in the later period, like in the age of Dr. Johnson. And when William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge published their lyrical ballads in 1798, that was the end of classical age in English literature, and that was the start of romantic age in English literature that we are going to study in our next lectures. And again I will say that this classical age, some of the critics say that this classical age is divided into three periods. Two periods I have talked about just now, that age of Alexander Pope from 1700 to 1744, and age of Dr. Johnson from 1745 to 1798. So what's that third period? That third period is Age of Drydon that we studied in our previous lecture. So I told you people that John Dryden was the man who laid the foundation of classical school of thought in English literature. So his period, his age is also included in classical age in English literature according to some of the critics. Now, there are several names which are given to this age, classical age. It is called neoclassical age, it is called age of reason, it is also called as age of good sense, it is also called as Augustan age, it is called Augustan age as well, it is called classical age as well. So different names have been given to this name. The word classics, you often talk about classical music, that he or she loves classical songs. So what does it mean by classical? So the term classics first time was used for great Greek and Roman writers like Virgil and Homer. Their work was called classics. So because the writers of classical age like Swift, like Pope, like Dr. Johnson, like Edison, they actually copied and imitated Virgil and Homer. They imitated Roman and Greek writers who were called classical writers. So because the writers of 18th century in English literature, they imitated them, that's why the people also call them that they are classical writers, because they are copying and they are following the traditions of great Greek and Roman writers. And let me tell you that these writers, the writers of 18th century, did copy the traditions of Virgil and Homer. They did imitate the traditions of Greek and Roman writers, but it was their outward and apparent performances that they were copying in their art and their work. It was not the soul, it was not the spirit of the writers of Rome and Greek that they were copying. So that's why this classicism is also called as shame classicism, or it is also called as pseudo classicism. because they were not imitating the spirit and the soul of those great writers. Well, again, as it is called as the age of reason. So why is it called age of reason? It is called age of reason because the writers of this age, they stressed on reason, they stressed on logic, on reason, on rational thought. There was no place of imagination here in this age. So when I say that there was no place of imagination in this age, so it does mean that there won't be poetry of high class or outstanding poetry of high merit won't be here in this age, in this classical age, because they gave much importance and much value to reason. This is also called Augustan Age in English literature because Augustus was emperor of Rome. He was a Roman emperor, and during his time large number of writers were producing a work of great merit. So the people called that age as Augustan Age in Rome. So when now they saw here in England in 18th century, large number of writers were, writing and producing a work of great merit. So that's why they also named these writers as well as Augustan writers, and this age was called as Augustan Age. As I'm saying that they propagated and they valued reason over emotion. In previous ages, in Elizabethan age, emotion had great importance, but here there wasn't any emotion, there wasn't any place of feelings and emotions, just stress, and the focus was on reason, and the focus was on experiment, the focus was on observation, the focus was on logic. So these are the important features of this age, classical age. Moving ahead, it was a time, it was a period when there were a lot of religious and political controversies around, and the people were really much interested in those controversies. They wanted to know more and more. They wanted to know more and more about the politics. They wanted to know more and more about those religious controversies. The people were very much interested. So to cater the interest of the people, to deal with this interest of the people, at that time, large number of pamphlets, journals and magazines were published, and you can have an idea out of it that all these things will obviously be in prose, the things will not be in poetry. So the focus and the chief characteristic and the chief feature of classical age was that its focus was on poetry, its focus was on prose instead of poetry. Even poetry that I am talking about, poetry was in prosaic form. It lacked that poetic genius, it lacked that poetic spirit that we saw in previous ages. So it was a prosaic poetry. As I'm saying that it was the age of religious and political controversies, and the people really had great interest in those religious and political controversies. So the writers of classical age, they wanted to fulfill the requirements, they wanted to fulfill the needs of the people, and that's why they produced their work in the form of prose instead of in poetry. So the merit of this age, classical age, chiefly lies in the genre of prose instead of in the genre of poetry, as we have seen in previous ages. Moving ahead, another important thing and another important literary characteristic of classical age is focus on realism and preciseness. These were actually two characteristics of our previous age, Restoration period. So the writers of classical age, they carried these two things, preciseness and realism, to its to perfection. So here realism and preciseness got perfection. As I've already said that realism is to portray the life as it is, and preciseness means to say and speak and write accurate words. There was no place of exaggeration. There was no place of hard and tough, vocabulary. There was no place of exaggeration, metaphors, similes, personifications, as we had seen in metaphysical poetry. So they emphasized and they focused on precise style, precise writing style, and they focused on realism. Well, talking about the other main literary characteristic of this age was satire. Satire is actually something for which classical age is best known. The two political parties, Whigs and Tories, they had a great conflict with each other, and they hired writers, both the parties, Whigs and Tories, both these political parties, they hired writers. They gave them huge rewards and prizes to write against their opponents, to write against their rivals. And some of the writers like Jonathan Swift, they were themselves the part of some political parties indirectly. So they started flinging their arrows of criticism and satire on their opponents, on their rivals. You know that some of the writers also, some of the literary figures also happen to be the part of political movements. You can say that in subcontinent, Allama Muhammad Iqbal, he was a literary figure and he himself was the part of political movement, and he himself was a part of a political party, Muslim League. In the same way, some of the writers themselves were indirectly the part of political parties, Whigs and Tories. So they were criticizing, they were satirizing in their art, in their literature, in their works, their opponents and their rivals. So this is an important thing about the writers of classical age, that their chief ability, their chief quality was the satire that they used in their prose. And last but not least, when we are talking about prose, we must keep in mind novel. So this was the age of origin and development of novel in English literature. We talked about Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress in our previous lecture. That was actually the start of novel in English literature, but as far as technical perspective and technical point of view is concerned, Pilgrim's Progress does not fall into the category of a novel, regular novel. It's not a regular novel, but that was a foundation, that was a founding stone for the novel. It were the really writers of classical age like Richardson and like you can say that Henry Fielding, Daniel Defoe. These were the writers who actually originated and developed English novel in classical age in 18th century, and this is here from where novel starts in English literature. Novel starts developing in English literature. So I think that that's all here for now. We'll study about the major writers and their major works in our next lecture. So that was all about the important literary characteristics of classical age in English literature. Thank you very much.